Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about worldwide shipping production and why it's something really important that we have to keep our eye on. And the reason we're talking about this is because of this humiliating loss that the United States seems to be suffering in Ukraine, okay? Because they're kind of using Ukraine as a proxy to fight the Russians. And it looks like the Russians are beating them, okay? Not beating them in the way that the United States expected this war to be fought, but beating them nonetheless over a period of 2 years, right? So initially, yeah, it looked like the Russians might have been like really sloppy, not knowing what they were doing, but they learned, okay? And one of the big mistakes that the United States made in instigating this war between the Russians and the Ukrainians is that, whereas before maybe the Russian military was somewhat green and inexperienced, well, now they got a lot of experience, right? They've gotten a lot better at war, right? The more you do war, the better you get, right? But anyway, we're going to be talking about shipping here because of this, disaster that I'm seeing unfold in Ukraine. It's making me question everything. Okay, because the United States CIA, were telling us that Russia was going to collapse within a month or two. That's clearly not what happened. So this makes me question everything else. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to look at was shipping production. And the reason why this is important is because the reason why the United States was so successful in World War II is because they could outproduce the Japanese and the Germans, right? So they beat them on productions. I think the United States lost 4 Shermans for every one Tiger that they destroyed. The point is that it doesn't matter how many Shermans were destroyed. The United States was able to keep sending in more and more Shermans behind it. Okay. And initially, as far as the naval battles, right, against the Japanese, the Navy was kind of green, all right? It took them a while to learn how to actually fight wars at seas against the Japanese and how to use the aircraft carriers, right? Because, going into World War II, the U.S. military thought that this was going to be a battle between battleships, okay? And it turned out to be a completely different type of battle at sea. Okay? The aircraft carriers are what dominated in that war, and the reason why the United States was so successful is because the shipping yards were able to just keep pumping out, ships. Okay, and it didn't matter if the Japanese were successful in sinking a couple of ships or a couple of submarines. The United States just kept producing more and more and more. So in 2023, China, right? Let's talk about China first. In 2023, China basically produced more than 50% of the entire world's ships, right? And this is based on tonnage, right? So if you go by tonnage, China produced more than 50% of the world's ships. And there's a couple of different ways to look at this because they look at like orders that were finished, new orders that were started, orders that new orders being placed. But when you look at all 3 of those things, all of them for China come in somewhere between 50 and 55%. So not only did they produce more than 50% of the world ships, but as far as new orders coming in, they're going to keep producing 50% plus. Okay, so I said, okay, fine. Does that mean that the United States produced, I don't know, the other 50% of the world ships? So I looked up what the U.S. produced in 2023. You see that number there, right? That's not 13%, okay? That's 0.13%, okay? So less than 1% of the world's ships were produced by the United States. Okay, so there was about 1,000 ships that China, produced. Only 10 new ships. Okay, so if you look back and you look at the lessons of World War II, that you win wars with mass production, what does this tell you? Okay, it tells us that the United States is in deep, deep shit. Okay, they keep thinking that they got this great military. I don't care how good the military is. I don't care how experienced it is. Okay, because it is probably the most experienced military in the whole world because they keep fighting wars. But sooner or later, everything gets blown up, right? So I don't think they're going to be able to replace things. Okay. And so this looks really, really bad. I mean, I did not know. I mean, the information's been out there. It's just like I never went to look it up. I never realized, that China had taken such a huge percentage of the world's, of the world's shipping production. Okay, I mean, if you look at this, it's like they could take over the whole world. I mean, there's no way that the United States can catch up because you might say, hey, yeah, maybe this, but they could ramp up production. No, they can't. If you don't have experience doing things, you're not going to go from 10 ships a year to 1,000 ships a year, right? This is really bad. Okay, this is really bad, and this is contrary to what we've been hearing about how great and powerful the U.S. military is. Okay, again, how great and powerful the U.S. military is based solely on their ability to beat really small countries. Okay, that's what that's based upon. But if you look at, again, looking at what happened in Ukraine, that's the catalyst for us to say, hey, wait a second, let's take a look for ourselves. Forget about what they're saying. Let's take a look ourselves and see what the numbers are. Okay, and there's no way they could ever keep up with the Chinese with Chinese shipping production and a Chinese Navy. Now you might say, hey, all these ships, these are cargo ships. They're not battleships. They're not aircraft carriers, right? But it's a lot easier for China to go from building cargo ships, right? They can make that transition from cargo ships to, let's say, battleships and aircraft carriers a lot easier than the United States going from 10 new ships a year to 1,000 ships a year. Okay, that is a much bigger hurdle to make, to go from 10 to 1,000. They can go from cargo ships to military ships pretty quickly, but the United States would not be able to go from 10 ships to 1,000 ships. Okay, so this is the other side. Okay, because I've done a couple of videos where I've been talking about, the main weapon of the United States is its dollar. Okay, so what happens is when the United States prints money, they call it borrowing, but when they print money, right, they dilute the money. And normally money dilution causes inflation, but they're able to spread out that money dilution around the world. And in fact, what that really is, it's a tax. Because anytime the government prints money, they dilute our money, they reduce the buying power of our money through inflation. Well, anytime the government reduces your buying power, right, they're basically taxing you. So through inflation, the United States basically taxes the entire world. Okay, that's why they've been able to get by with a lot of stuff that they've been getting by. And I've done a number of videos. The rest of the world is no longer content to sit back and take this. Okay, so Russia, China, they're forming alliances. Again, the sanctions that the United States put on Russia basically drove Russia into the hands of China, and the two are now working together. And that's the last thing you want to do with your enemies. The last thing you want to do is drive your enemies into each other and have them working together. So, I mean, I don't know who these are some pretty stupid people in Washington. I mean, all these military generals that, like, a lot of times they'll put on, like, Fox News and CNN and all these. I mean, these are pretty stupid people. I mean, they're sitting there talking about tactics when they should be screaming about this, saying, hey, China produces 50% of the world's ships, okay? And the United States produces 0.13%. I mean, that's what they should be screaming on the news. Forget about the tactics and experience and, how, the blunders that the Russians are making. Who gives a shit, okay? I mean, they can make more stuff. I mean, yeah, the Russians took some losses. They lost some tanks. they're cranking them out. Okay, it doesn't matter if they lose some airplanes. It doesn't matter if they lose some tanks. They have the ability to make more. Okay, now by contrast, here in the United States, what do we have the ability to do? Okay, we have the ability to print money. That's the only thing we do. We have the ability to put more people on welfare. We actually import people from the South to put them on welfare. So the only thing that the U.S. government is good at is putting more and more people on welfare, printing money, and basically instigating wars around the world that they are now losing, and they're losing big. Okay, I didn't believe, because 2 years ago I was hearing people saying that, I was hearing both sides of this, right? I was hearing Ukraine winning, I was hearing Russians winning. I'm like, okay. At this point, enough information has leaked out that it definitely looks like Russia winning. United States humiliated. Okay, this is a very bad humiliation that they've suffered, and it's this humiliation is making the whole world basically do what I did, is make you start looking at some of these hard numbers and saying, wait a second. On one hand, the only thing you can do is really print more money and dilute the existing money. On the other hand, you don't have any real production. I mean, it doesn't look good for the United States. I mean, I have to tell you guys, it doesn't look good. And if you guys believe otherwise, please, I mean, let me know in the comments. I mean, I'm searching here. I'm searching for information. This isn't the information I was looking for. This is the information I found. This is not, I mean, it's been out there for a long time. People that were looking at this information knew it. The information that I've been looking at, because my background is accounting, okay? The information I've been looking at is the money printing side of this, because what they should just drop the word debt. Okay, we don't borrow, we print. Okay, there's no debt. Okay, debt is like I've done a separate video on this. When we take a mortgage on a house or finance a car, okay, we put up a real asset, a car, okay, or we put up a house, okay, or if you got a gold mine, you can go mine some gold. You give that to the bank. The bank uses that real asset to create money, okay? So they say, okay, this house is worth $200,000. Here you go. Here's a mortgage for $200,000. They create that money. But what happens is they don't create the interest. So you have to pay back $300,000, okay? So they don't, across the board, banks don't create interest. So the current generation of borrowers depends on the next generation of borrowers to come in and create more money so that the first generation can pay off their interest, okay? And this keeps going. And that's how the money supply is supposed to slowly grow with a growing economy. The government side of this is they don't actually put up a real asset. They basically put up debt, which is giving themselves an IOU. So the government can create an unlimited amount of money. So this Ponzi scheme works, and it can grow slowly unless one player in this becomes so big that they just completely throw the whole system out of bounds. So if I take a mortgage on a house, I just basically, somebody else needs to come in behind me of my size, okay, to create more money next year so I can have money to pay back the interest. Well, when the government basically creates money to the tune of trillions of dollars, somebody of their size needs to come into the system and basically, create trillions of dollars. And there's nobody that can do that. There's nobody big enough to come in and take the place of the government. And that's part of what I think the United States was trying to do in Ukraine, is they were trying to shove money in through Ukraine and pump it throughout Europe to get more of Europe on the US dollar, so that they could have more money creation to keep this Ponzi scheme going. But the exact opposite is actually happening, right? Because once they put the sanctions on Russia, everybody around the world is like, wait a second, if they can freeze Russian money, they can freeze our money. I don't want US dollars. I want something else that the United States cannot control, okay? So this is a bad situation. This is I don't see a solution to this, okay? There's no real solution to this. The only thing that, I'd have to really sit down and crunch numbers, and I don't have all the information to crunch the numbers. But the only way that I think the United States might be able to stop China, okay, is if they locked up all trade, like no trade, like zero trade with China, in an effort to like completely crash their economy. Okay, and use the NATO nations to just seal off any trade with China in an attempt to crash their economy. That's the only thing that I don't know if it would work, but that's what I would look at. The question there is, okay, so if we stop importing from China, who's gonna make all this shit that we use, right? Because we don't produce anything in the United States. So it's a question of like, okay, if we shut off China, how quickly can the United States and the NATO countries and G7 countries switch over from a money printing economy to an actual production economy? Okay, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's what it would take. I mean, if they would have to basically just shut down China and get that economy to crash in on itself, and that's a maybe. I don't know if it would work. That would be a maybe. And on the other side, they have to have a plan to immediately like ramp up production, which I don't think they can do in the United States. Like, how do you get that many people off of welfare and get them working? Okay, I mean, basically cut off the welfare. The problem is if they just cut off the welfare, right? People are gonna stop voting for Democrats, so they're not gonna cut off the welfare. So there's like no solution to this. Okay, this is like a downward spiral. Okay, so anyway, let me know what you guys think. I don't have answers. I mean, I'm just observing and telling you guys what I see. Okay, if you guys see something different, please put it in the comments. Talk to you all soon.